G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video on, well, as the title says, the sharpshooter. And it's actually talking about a bit of a slang term, but it's in reference to, or my understanding at least, it's in reference to a model of rifle or a design of rifle from the middle of a couple of centuries ago, so the middle of the 1800s, called the Sharps rifle. And as for those people who know on the channel, the reason I'm talking about it is you've seen a couple of them on the channel. This one here is a Quigley model Pedicoli rifle, and this one here, which we've recently got to us by Sharper Australia, this is the cavalry, the 22-inch cavalry Sharps carbine. So both movie guns in their own right. One from this one, the Quigley, and I'll go through a little bit more. This is from Down Under, the Quigley Down Under, which is actually not really a model of rifle. It is now, since the movie. It is a model that is made by various companies, and I'll explain a little bit more of that. And this is of, like I said, of Chiapa, I should say, make this rifle here, which is actually a rifle that was built in I think over 200,000 of them that were built for the military in America. By Sharps originally, which I think was C Sharps, but were built them originally, but built by companies back then as a cavalry, largely taken up by the cavalry. They have the saddle ring on the side here. I've taped this one back so it doesn't rub around on there, but that's what it was set up for. And I suppose I want to go through really this with shooting these videos and using these rifles and the videos I put forward. There's a fair bit of information that we've sort of got back from comments and things, and in talking to people, there is some interesting bits and details that I thought I'd put together a video with. Some of those might not be all perfectly accurate. Some of it is, like I said, of a comment. Some of it I remember and can't find the comments, or I've read stuff and various details. But I wanted to go through and explain a few things about these rifles and about the history of these rifles. To start off with, yes, that is on in the middle. I think right in the middle of the 1800s, and it was started as a percussion cap rifle, basically a muzzle loader that had a percussion cap on it, and that's how this rifle started. And I think they were largely done in not just the short; they were done in a full length, which I think was around the 28 inches. Was where they sort of started at, and there were a fair few of them in a 50 cal, so they were .52 as a muzzle loader. They found that when the development of metallic cartridges, or cartridges, even paper cartridges, but they found the development of cartridges, that the Sharps rifle was one of the easy ones to convert to a cartridge rifle. So a fair bit of that happened. And in that same time of things, we're moving up into the Civil War, when a lot of firearms were needed to be made, that sort of stuff. The Sharps was one of the rifles. I think the main ones, from what I recall, and no doubt there's the commenters will correct me on this sort of stuff, but I think there was, it was a Remington rolling block. There was the Henry repeater rifle. There was the Spencer rifle, another repeater rifle. And there was the Sharps rifle. These were major competitors, or major contenders in that period of time. The Sharps rifle, its benefits, and I'm not going to go full history of that sort of stuff. Maybe we'll get to look at those rifles later on and can go through more of those details. But the Sharps rifle had the advantage of, as I said, it was easily converted to a cartridge rifle, then it was produced as a cartridge rifle. It was quick to reload because in the breech loader, just putting the lever down, put a round in, put it back in, it was quick on that side of things. But also, compared to several, or at least a couple of the others, it was in the 45-70. So it had some more basically stopping power, shoot longer distance, more accurate longer distance, because it had a full length cartridge. A couple of the others, the Spencer and the Henry in particular, were back down in your normal, I think more likely the 44-40, back down in like a 45 Colt sort of size round. So these had some extra power in the 45-70 side of things, so it became known as a very accurate rifle because of those features, and a very easy to use rifle because of those features. And then we go into, I suppose, beyond talking about what I don't know about that side of things, where they really were used as the Sharps rifle. And there was a couple others as along with that, but the Sharps rifle was specifically used beyond that point and outside of the other side of the Civil War and that type of things, was used in both target shooting and in buffalo hunting. I suppose there's a couple of different directions to go there. To start off with, in both cases, the Sharps carbine, which there was literally hundreds of thousands of, was a very popular thing because it was very available. You get cartridges for it. It was used very much on that form. But being the carbine, it was the 22-inch barrel, which the short ones were, was much more for closer range stuff. Although still, and the place where it's noted as to its, or comments about its accuracy of a rifle were noted. If you watch the latest True Grit movie, the last of the True Grit, not the last one that has been, to my knowledge at least, which had Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon, and I've forgotten the name of the young lady. Great movie, but really good movie.
Shot! That was 400 yards at least.
Well, the Sharps carbine.
The Sharps carbine, there was the one that was referenced as the very accurate rifle that was used to for the last shot in that movie, was used with that rifle. That was the rifle was used for it, and so that's what it's referenced there. So very good at that type of thing. But what actually was found for the target shooting and for buffalo hunting was they wanted the longer rifle. And I suppose that's where I'd go into. There's a couple of stories I know there. One is, I think it was in 1873 that there was the beginning of, it was the World Cup, I think it was the Creedmoor match, but essentially it was the USA competing against Ireland over in Ireland. Is what I've read of it so far, at least. And the first match went over there, and I don't know exactly. I think the Sharps rifle might have been there. I'm not really certain as to what they were actually using over there. There is all sorts of interesting things about the way things were shot in that sort of match. There was prone shooting. It was all offhand, but I think it was prone shooting. And also there's images and read of peculiar ways of shooting where people would lay on their back, legs crossed, arm behind the head, and have the rifle shooting between their legs, so away from them. So quite a peculiar way to shoot. I don't know if I'd even like to try that position, but it was an interesting way to go through and shoot things, and that's what they did. The long and the short of that story is, the first time over there, the Americans got their hats handed to them. They were beaten soundly. The logic to that story is that what actually happened out of that is they decided some stage there was going to be a competition the next year. The Irish were pretty full of themselves. They'd done really well. They'd won easily, and they didn't do very much about what they had. They didn't take it too much seriously. They figured they were going to do the same thing next year. The Americans, on the other hand, took that to heart and did a lot of work. I don't know what happened in that process, but it sort of fits the Quigley model a little bit, which I'm still waiting to get into, and I'll let you know. But the Americans went home and did a whole heap of work, and then came back, and the next year they were victorious. They won because of all their extra work in development of the firearms and that side of things. So an interesting story, some interesting images of how people were shooting that sort of stuff, and there's quite a bit to read about the matches and that sort of stuff, and I think they were shooting out to 1,000 yards at that stage. But the Americans came home victorious. And the reason it's relevant to the Quigley rifle is, in truth, as I started this, there was no such thing as a Quigley rifle. That was largely, even in the buffalo hunting, which is another story about to get into, but certainly in the target shooting, most of the rifles were custom. They would get gunsmiths to build custom bits and pieces. So that suits the Quigley story of the longer barrel and how far it can shoot and all that sort of stuff. They were custom rifles. Although built off the Sharps action, they were custom rifles in the way of their barrel and their stocks and that sort of stuff, customized to make them more accurate and to get a better result. Even to I know a gentleman who has a couple of rifles set up for I don't know if you call it sublime, basically the shooting on your back, where they had the peep sight, which is normally in the back of the breech, was mounted right down the back here. So it was mounted right down the back of the buttstock. So when you had the rifle in front of you, laying on your back with it between your cross legs, with your handhold here, you had your sight closer to your eye, but you also had an extremely long sight radius to make it for even more accurate. Very peculiar way to shoot a firearm. Obviously didn't last very long, but they were built, like I said, with the peep sight right back down the back here, so that you had all this, you use the rifle appropriately for that. The next bit on the custom rifle type of thing, which is another interesting story, and there's so many more details to this, I'm not going to cloud it up. I don't know them well enough to repeat them properly. But that was with the buffalo hunting. Now the buffalo hunting, a couple of things to go with the buffalo hunting side of it. The buffalo hunting, listen, I suppose the first part of the story goes with the common story is that the white man, the European, came to America and almost wiped out the buffalo. There were millions of them and wiped them out, and the white man was the man who did that. And there's some truth to that, but it didn't start in that place actually. From the stories I've heard, at least, to go with all this sort of stuff, and some of the writings that are there from very early sightings of the Americas, was that the first sightings, and I don't know when the year this is, whether it's 1500s or 1300s or where it was, but the first sightings of the plains where the buffalo exists in America they were absolutely full of buffalo. You could view it, and it was like the world, the earth was moving, the plains were moving. They were that full with buffalo. And although there were a lot of buffalo when next reported by the Europeans when settling started in the USA, there was far fewer than the amount of buffalo, although lots of them still, there were a lot less. And the logic or the reason that comes with that is that prior to the conquistadors or the Spanish, so Christopher Columbus and then the Spanish and that type of thing that came to the lower part, down where the Mayans and the Incans and that sort of stuff down in South America, and then came into the lower half of North America. Prior to that side of things, of that side of the Europeans in the Spanish and that side, there were no horses there were no Mustangs, there were no horses in the American continent. The horses came with the Spanish. And with that came basically when the Spanish left, or the conquistadors left, they left the horses. And the American Indians, the indigenous Indians to the North America at that stage, had learned how to use the horses by watching what was going on. That made them far more effective hunters. But that's what started the decline of the buffalo herds. And through the process of treaties and bits and pieces with the settlement of the Americas, there was some politics involved with that process. I don't know the story properly, I've only heard it sort of offhand, but it was along the lines of settlers or pastoralists wanted to take more control of the land, and because of the buffalo, they were in the road, and that kept the Indians in the road, and then by killing the buffalo, they were going to get control of the land. I think it was something along those lines. Needless to say, all sorts of things at the beginning of nations. The process that then happened is they had buffalo hunting. The interesting bit of that detail to go with buffalo hunting was that they would set up with rifles. I think they started, as I said, there was a lot of the cavalry, there's a lot of those sort of rifles, which did the job thoroughly at killing a buffalo, but it was too close to the herd. And by being that close to the herd, there was too much bang and the herd would stampede, and off they'd go, and then they had to chase them. So they didn't get the job done very effectively like that. They found they had to be further back. I don't know the distance. I'm presuming they needed to be 500 yards or something or other way to do the job where the herd wouldn't run away. And by shooting at the back of the herd, so they kept shooting at the back of the herd, they'd just drop off the buffalo, they would just fall down dead, and the herd would just carry on. So they needed to shoot at distance into the back of the herd, and to do that, to get enough distance and carry enough energy out there, once again the custom rifles came into play, where they wanted longer barrels. They were then in the cartridge. So then your 45-90s, your 45-110s, your 45-120s, all custom. People like to say it was a specific rifle. They were very custom to do this. They would get rifles built with longer barrels, so very much like that. You know, it was an extra 4 inches long, or it was in, I've forgotten exactly the reference in the Quigley story, but where it talks about this custom rifle built to do this sort of stuff, built to shoot this sort of distance. That was very much the nature of what those rifles were. They were custom rifles. So set up with all sorts of bits and pieces to do that job properly. The next bit of that story is, yes, they became very good at doing that. So they did do a good job of wiping out the herd, because not only there was some political motive to it, but the skins were used for many things. So that was basically, they would drop the animals, the buffalo, the shooters would just carry on following the herd, and then in the wagons would come the skinners, and they go through and skin the buffalo. They would leave the carcasses there, literally there to rot, which is, and whether that flesh was used by tribes or was just the buzzards and left to rot, I don't know the story of that. I do know the next bit of the story, which is something which I didn't realise until only this year, was that the skeletons were very much prized. I heard reference to, there's a movie called The White Buffalo, and then that is the only footage that I've heard referenced, where you can actually see at the beginning of the movie, as the train rolls into the plains where they're going, is you can see skeletons stacked on top of each other alongside the railroad. What was actually happening with those skeletons was they were all shipped across to, I think it was the UK, I'm not sure where it was, or somewhere over around England, over that side of the world, and where there were warehouses stacked, and I've heard like 4-story warehouses that were 2 miles long, full of buffalo skeletons. And the reason for that is something that I have heard lots of times, and I've never put it together. And that reason is fine bone china. Yeah, fine bone china, this delicate painted thing that's in your grandmother's closet, in your grandmother's cabinet, that sort of stuff, or it used to be in mine, the type of stuff you hear about. But that's what it was being made for. That's what the skeletons were used for. So very thoroughly used on that side of things. So an interesting segue, just something I found interesting and I wanted to share. Okay, so back to the rifle. That does make sense of the Quigley rifle. The Quigley rifle was a custom rifle. It became a Quigley rifle, which this is termed a Quigley rifle because it is this is a Pedersoli. And they make the Quigley rifle, which is just trying to be basically like what that rifle was in the movie. So that's where that comes from. Yes, it all makes sense, and I suppose that's the brief history. I'm sure I got some of that wrong. I'm sure there's so much more to do. So put your stories in the comments, that sort of stuff. It is information that is very much disappearing, but there's lots of it, from the Creedmoor competition, from that competition, to the buffalo, from all that sort of stuff. Lots of things involved with the sharpshooter, which is where, from my understanding, where sharpshooter came from, known as being a target or sniper or whatever it is. He's sharpshooter. Well, it was all talking about these Sharps rifles. So there's a couple other things that I want to get into in shooting these rifles, which I've done a little bit of. Only recently shot with the little one, the carbine, which is really very well balanced, really nice to shoot gun, and it is. The only quirky thing I would say, the difference is, for those people that don't realise, like I said, has a ring on the other side here for being able to, I presume, to hook to a lash to your saddle, to your gear, so you don't lose it, that type of stuff. Has a lock on the trigger guard, so it can't rack while you're messing around, that sort of stuff. So that's unlike the target one that doesn't have anything like that. Has a single stage trigger, and the most peculiar thing I found about it is it's designed to put both your fingers in the trigger guard, which is quite unusual for a lever action. So that was interesting. The rest of it, listen, it is all the things that it should be. It works really nice. It's got a nice balance. It really does shoot to your shoulder properly, and we're going to use it quite a bit of this season. and thanks very much to the guys at Chiapa, Australia, for getting it to us. It's something that really does is, oh, listen, going to be great fun to use, and I really want to sort of push the boundaries on what I can do with it. I got it specifically because of a feature with this fella here, the Quigley, which is, as I said, of a custom rifle that was used a lot. One of the, there's a few confusing things that come about this sort of rifle. The differences certainly are, it's a set trigger, so it has two blades to pull on the trigger. So you actually, you set one which has all the pressure on it. And I should say with these, they do have a fair bit of pressure in the trigger. I think it was only 8 pounds. I've done what probably they all did. I got into the spring and I pulled it back down to 6 pounds. It wasted the spring. It's got a funny sort of fork spring. I've taken that down in weight, so got it back down. I've got to go out and test it again, but it is becoming all nice to use on that sort of stuff. This one here probably has the same sort of 8 pounds of pressure on the set trigger, but when you go to the fine trigger, we're back down into 2 or 3 ounces. It's a very, very light trigger, all adjustable also, whereas these ones aren't, other than actually modifying them. I suppose that one of the big feature about this thing, apart from the 2 triggers, is these were not designed to be offhand shot. So this here, which, yes, the Quigley rifle shows them very much being shot like that. If you look at that, that's the balance of these. There's no weight down the back here at all. So the balance isn't suits at all. And at 13.5 pounds, there's a lot of weight that you're extending out the front, on the front of your arm. That's actually set up in the shooting at 1800 yards and where this does shoot to. But it's in no means, this is, although doable, not designed to be shot in an offhand format. They are very much designed to be shot in that weird prone side of things, that your arms supported, shooting on your legs, or really, and how they were really used, were shot in sticks. And that brings up an interesting point. In this modern world, and I don't know when this happened, I'm presuming somewhere in the 60s or 70s, we figured out about free floating a barrel. It was even later than that. We figured out free floating a barrel because any interference with the stock and that side of things, especially when you're resting on the forend, changes the trajectory and all sorts of things that happens. We know all the advantages of free floating a barrel. So particularly when you see this sort of thing resting on sticks up the front here, there's lots of comments that will say, well, you shouldn't shoot like that. That's the wrong way to do it. You know, you're going to not get any accuracy. Well, it's not how these things were designed. These things, this bit here bolts directly to the barrel. So even when you got your hand on your foregrip, you're resting on the barrel. It's not free floated, not designed to be. To the point of, if you actually view some of the Quigley matches, that sort of stuff, you'll find that some guys will have a bit of tape around the barrel. A little bit of tape around the barrel. Now, I haven't done this because I'm sort of doing it that way, but I'm actually doing a fair bit of supporting it, and I've got my own logic to go on up to. But they'll go along with a soft bit of wood and tap the barrel, and you can actually find a resonant point or a dead point in the barrel where it doesn't make the sound. I've forgotten if it makes more sound or less sound, but you actually find this spot in the barrel. That is the spot where you're supposed to put your rest, and that to get the most accuracy by largely just then resting it heavily on the sticks, and so it's on the dead spot, and then you're shooting behind, you shoot it. My logic, what I was trying to do, was trying to get a trap flow. I was sort of carrying it to a degree and using the sticks to help. We got good accuracy, but I'm not trying to say I'm doing it the right way. But it is designed to be rested on the barrel. Even on this fella here, where it's very comfortable to shoot on holding the forend, it's still all attached. This is all touching the barrel. So even you touch here, you're touching the barrel. It's not free floated. It's a different thing. So that's the first bit I'd say on that sort of front that is different to what we're used to. Another feature that people, so I should say on that thing also, there's another bit why people think you should shoot them offhand, and I've done it. I've seen several people do it. There's people that do it shooting offhand. And that's because the Quigley movie showed Tom Selleck very comfortably doing that thing, holding up with actually a gentle hand, holding the rifle up and shooting it offhand.
quite certain, Mr. Quigley, that you wouldn't like the bucket a bit closer?
What they didn't tell you is they had two rifles built for that. One was a rifle that, I don't know if they both really went bang. One really went bang, one was a rifle in all sense of it. The other one, which might have gone bang as well, I don't know, but the other one had an aluminium barrel. And the logic, I think, was written so it was easier to carry around and that sort of stuff and move to sets and things that are so heavy. The real logic, which is obvious to it, is anyone who's held up these for any length of time and positioned for any length of time, you start doing this for any length of time, this gets tiring. That's basically 13 pounds held out half a metre from your body. It gets fairly tiring on your body. So that would have been the real reason. You can imagine in a photo shoot, you'd be redoing things. You know, sit still. You'd be redoing things time after time after time after time to get everyone happy with filming it side of things, and that would just wear you down. That'd be hard. So you make one with an aluminium barrel, would have the same sort of balance as a little one, and you could really do it all day. So that'd be the real logic to it, and that's the real logic to these things. They weren't designed to be shot offhand at all. They're designed to shot off a rest in a prone position or wherever it is. That's how they're designed to be shot, and they shoot very accurately like that. Another detail, which is more a comment from commenters, I should say, is the angle of this sight. Most people would think that a sight should be parallel to the barrel. That's how you should set it up. It's not how this sort of peep sight works. They actually need to be adjusted all the time because they need to be parallel or right angles to this angle here, to that angle down to that aperture, because that's where you're viewing through them. And that little window there, if you haven't got it parallel, you can't see properly, or right angles. So it needs to be, this is angled quite a bit forward to get that right angle down to there. If I came back down to where I was using it down the bottom here, then you'd need to, it's all that this is on a spring, but you'd adjust it to do that. But you'd then set it up so it's parallel to that angle there. That's how these sights are made to be used. Tiny bit low that one, I think I overcorrected.
Hit! It got him! Bottom right! Yay!
I think that's the main ingredients. So the last bit I'd say is that in both these cases, I'm using them in how I'm doing it is with smokeless powder. With this one here, it's only a 45-70, and yes, the movie is referencing a 45-110. So that's exactly what that's the nature of black powder, which I should get into just briefly. Black powder, even more so than smokeless powder, uses a longer barrel because of the nature of the exploding and the way it propagates down. The black powder works is it keeps on burning, it keeps on exploding, it gets to a pressure point and then slows down and speeds up. But basically it can run the whole, using a longer barrel, it can take a larger bullet and get it up to speed. So that was the whole logic. The larger bullet gives you a better ballistic coefficient, but you've got to get it going faster. So that's where they get the longer barrels from. With using smokeless powder, I can get exactly the same result or even more power with just a 45-70. For those people who think you need to be a 45-110 or 45-120, that sort of stuff to get the same sort of effect, the 45-70 with the right powder, with nitro powder or smokeless powder, can create exactly the same sort of power, or even more so actually. It's a little bit heavier to shoot because of the speed and the power that nitro works. I can't get black powder in the state at this moment for the last couple of years. I haven't managed to find it. What I've done to get this one so I can shoot it as pretty much they did shoot them in the 45-70 is I'm running 2209. So it's a lot slower burning powder than you'd use in this sort of thing, but by doing that I can get it back down to the speeds I want, and that is running that's a 405 gram projectile, hard cast lead projectile, exactly what was used in the military and was used in those rifles largely. and I'm running it around the 1340 feet per second, which is about what they produced out of those things with a good load of black powder in them, with that whole 70 grains of black powder. I think they all shot it milder than that. When I read they would shoot them with 55 grains of black powder. I presume, you know, like I said, a lot used at close range sort of stuff, so a little gentle to shoot and using less of your powder you got with you, that sort of stuff. Another interesting feature I've heard on these, and there's nothing in this, but there's nothing in these ones, but there were some of these rifles, I think, with grinders in the buttstock that I read about as well. That was something people tried to use it for grinding coffee and that sort of stuff. From what I was read, it was designed for being able to grind charcoal in the aid of making your own black powder. So there was actually set up to be very self-proficient in the way of what those rifles were. Anyway, listen, I'm sure I'll stop babbling now. I really have got to the end of my little story of what I can tell you there. There's lots of other details that I've forgotten, but I'm sure there's also lots of details that that you folks out there have to share with us, and I can read them and maybe do another one with more of those details in there as well. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for checking in. I hope that was a little bit entertaining. I hope a little bit informative. I'm certainly looking forward to getting both of these sharpshooters back out in the paddock amongst our high-tech modern stuff, that type of thing. These are at least as much fun, if not more in some places. Certainly more of a challenge in some places, but great to use. Anyway, thank you for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.